The year is 1944 and Billy Wilder is on a hot streak. Keir, give us a brief overview of Wilder's run of movies so far.
Since he made the transition from successful screenwriter to screenwriter/director, Wilder has made 3 movies. The first, The Major and the Minor, a screwball comedy starring Ginger Rogers and Ray Milland, was both a critical success and a box office hit. The second, a war movie called Five Graves to Cairo, was a modest success. And his third, well, we don't need to say much about that one. It was Double Indemnity.
Not only were all these movies profitable and loved by critics and audiences alike, Wilder ran smooth, happy sets. Like Steven Soderbergh, the subject of our first season, Wilder brought in his movies on time and on budget, and he earned the respect of the A-list stars he worked with. And now, Billy Wilder, the refugee who came to Hollywood as a screenwriter before he could even write or speak English, was an A-lister. But would he be able to maintain that status with his bold and grim fourth feature? Would the studio he was contracted with, Paramount, even release it?
Welcome to the Filmographers podcast, the show where we study a director's entire career, one movie at a time. As Mike said, in our first season, we studied the fascinating life and times of Steven Soderbergh, and now, for season 2, we've turned our focus to the one and only Billy Wilder.
Keir, to kick this episode off, give us your one-sentence summary of The Lost Weekend.
Alcoholic writer Don Burnham, 10 Days on the Wagon, announces his plan to write a novel about his alcoholism, but instead ditches his supportive brother and embarks on a harrowing weekend bender that convinces him life is not worth living until his girlfriend Helen convinces him otherwise. Mike, you know I like to make these funny, but damn, there's not much I can do with this one.
Not a lot of wiggle room, and we're going to dive into that a lot today. It is a challenging topic, and viewers, listeners will get serious for a moment. It's not a very funny one. Before we get started, Keir and I do want to acknowledge that alcoholism is a serious disease, and if you or a loved one is struggling with it, please visit www.aa.org for the Alcoholic Anonymous website. There, you can find a local chapter and get the help you need.
It is a disease indeed. And one of the reasons Wilder turned down this dark alley is that on his previous movie, Double Indemnity, he worked side by side for months with someone whose struggles with alcoholism are legendary, Mr. Raymond Chandler.
What is your working procedure?
Yeah, to quote Mr. Churchill, it's blood, sweat, and tears, believe me. It is a drag. It is hard work. And it's not one of those things people imagine that muses come and they kiss your brow and there you are, kind of the poet in the clouds. Nothing like it.
Like all things with Wilder, mileage on his recollections vary. But he is pretty consistent on enjoying the process of directing more than the process of writing, which is why he always worked with a co-writer. He simply did not want to work alone. In our episode on The Major and the Minor and Five Graves to Cairo, and even our Patreon exclusive episode on Ninochka, we detailed Wilder's relationship with his first long-standing writing partner, Mr. Charles Brackett. In short, their relationship was bumpy. While they did manage to produce an envious amount of screenplays that are now considered classics, the process of making them was, to say the least, unpleasant. They fought. They screamed at each other. They threw things across their shared office on the Paramount lot. In his diaries, Brackett confessed to being overjoyed during his times away from Wilder and more than once vowed to never work with him again. But he kept coming back. Still, nothing Brackett and Wilder endured can compare to the tumultuous relationship Wilder had with famed crime novelist Raymond Chandler.
In our Double Indemnity episode, we covered how these two came together and how toxic their relationship was, even though it produced one of the greatest screenplays of all time. But what's pertinent to The Lost Weekend is Chandler's drinking. According to some reports, Chandler was clean and sober when he started adapting James M. Cain's famous novel. He had struggles with alcoholism in the past, but those struggles, again, according to some, were behind him. Other sources report that Chandler was only claiming to be sober and kept bottles of booze hidden all over his house and his office so he could sneak nips every chance he could. Either way, after working with Wilder, he resumed drinking with a vengeance. He even claimed that working with Wilder shortened his life. Ouch.
Whatever happened, by the time Wilder and Chandler reached the end of their work on Double Indemnity, Chandler was openly drinking again, and it wasn't pretty. Wilder had a front row seat to his co-writer's addiction, and it had a profound impact on him. He has said, more than once, that part of what inspired him to make The Lost Weekend was a desire to show Chandler to himself. But there are more reasons why Wilder and Brackett, his writing and producing partner, were so determined to bring The Lost Weekend, which was based on a novel by Charles Jackson, to the big screen. Keir, it's no secret that both you and I champion physical media.
We do, Mike. We love having movies on our shelves, we love the tactile experience, and we love getting lost in bonus features that you'll never find in a streaming library.
We have many favorite Blu-ray and 4K distributors, and chief among them is Vinegar Syndrome, who not only distributes cinematic gems, but they lovingly restore them as well.
Vinegar Syndrome boasts a wonderfully eclectic blend of exploitation essentials like Tammy and the T-Rex and Flesh for Frankenstein,
as well as classics like Michael Mann's The Keep, Elaine May's A New Leaf, and one of my personal favorites, Dirty Work, starring the great Norm Macdonald.
And let's not forget one of my personal favorites, John Dahl's Red Rock West.
They even carry Revealer, a movie I co-wrote with Tim Seeley. Like all of Vinegar Syndrome's releases, it's packed with extras. You can feel the care they put into each and every title in their catalog.
If you love movies, and if you love physical media, you're going to want to check out Vinegar Syndrome's entire library. Visit them at vinegarsyndrome.com. That's vinegarsyndrome.com.
Before we dive too deep into The Lost Weekend, I'd like to take a moment to remind listeners to check out our Patreon. It's a great way to support our work here at the Filmographers. We put a lot of time into each of these episodes, and the more support we get, the more we can do for you.
Our Patreon is also the only place to get the entire Filmographers experience. Just last month, we hosted a Double Indemnity book club, exclusive to Patreon members. And this month, we're going to discuss Wilder's concentration camp short film, Death Mills. We know, it's not the happiest topic to discuss, but the experience was formative for Wilder's life and career, and you won't want to miss it.
Visit us at patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. That's patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. Join for free or kick in a few bucks and get yourself some swag, like a coffee mug. For those who are watching, this is the coffee mug. This is one of the coffee mugs, or you can get a sticker. And thank you as well. Really big thanks to our newest members, Tracy and Sherry. Welcome to our Filmographers community. We're happy to have you.
The Lost Weekend stars Ray Milland as alcoholic writer Don Burnham, who, after abandoning a weekend trip with his brother Wick, played by Philip Terry, goes on a 3-day odyssey of drinking, moral depredation, and grisly desperation on his journey to reach both the bottom of a bottle of rye and the existential bottom of his life. It's a difficult movie to summarize because not much happens. It doesn't have a conventional plot. We simply follow Don on this epic bender. He dodges his girlfriend Helen, played by Jane Wyman, flirts with Gloria, a prostitute, played by Doris Dowling, and pleads and fights with Nat, his local bartender, played by Howard Da Silva. Through his descent into hell, we discover Don's failures, his flaws, and his strengths, giving us a complete portrait of a man so lost and so aware of his own suffering that we can't help but be captivated by his journey, despite how uncomfortable it makes us feel.
In the book Nobody's Perfect, author Charlotte Chandler says that Wilder discovered Charles Jackson's novel during a cross-country trip in 1944, shortly after the book's release. Wilder said this, quote, "I bought it in Chicago and started reading as the train pulled out of Union Station. The next thing I knew, the porter came by to make up my bed. We were somewhere between St. Louis and Kansas City. I had missed dinner. I figured if a novel can hold your attention like that during a long train trip, what would it be like up on the big screen. In the morning, I called and got Paramount to buy the book." End quote. But like Double Indemnity, which was deemed unfilmable under the Hays Code, adapting a book about an alcoholic determined to more or less drink himself to death wasn't an easy thing to do under the eye of Joseph Breen, the Hays Code's enforcer.
What's interesting, though, is that Breen, by all accounts, didn't seem bothered by this bleak portrait of an alcoholic. He was more concerned about Gloria, the prostitute, and the movie's homosexual undercurrent. One theme in the novel is that part of the reason Don drinks is to suppress his sexual identity.
But just as with Double Indemnity, Wilder wasn't about to let the rigid Hays Code stand in his way. According to Ed Sykoff in his book On Sunset Boulevard, Wilder had outlined the entire movie by the time he reached Penn Station, which is especially interesting because in Chandler's account, Wilder was heading west on this train trip, and now he's suddenly in New York. But that's Billy for you. Don't look at the details because they'll only break the raconteur's spell. Regardless of those details, Wilder called up Brackett in California knowing his writing partner would be eager to hear all about The Lost Weekend because Brackett had alcoholic demons of his own.
Although Brackett wasn't quite as eager as Wilder thought, at least not at first. The project shows up in Brackett's diary on March 8th, 1944, when he writes, quote, "In the afternoon, I pitched into a book called The Lost Weekend, for which Billy has a passion. It has not gripped me as yet," end quote. But eventually it did, and it's no wonder. As detailed in Sykoff's book and other sources, although not so much in his own diaries, Brackett's wife, Elizabeth, was a severe alcoholic. Brackett even institutionalized her more than once, but it didn't take. She kept drinking right until her death, just 4 years later in 1948. Brackett, in fact, was surrounded by alcoholics. In addition to being a screenwriter, he was a novelist, and he had many novelist friends, many of whom struggled with sobriety. Robert Benchley, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Dashiell Hammett, to name a few. In fact, there's a story that credits Brackett with saving Hammett's life when he found him blackout drunk in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Brackett paid his hotel bill and sobered him up enough to get him back home to New York. It sounds like a real-life experience of what happens to Don in The Lost Weekend.
And there's even more. Now, this is just speculation, but there are rumors. And remember, Brackett came from a well-to-do conservative family. There are rumors, though, that Brackett, like Don in the novel, was a closeted gay man. That can't be confirmed or denied, but various film historians have staked out both positions. According to Sykoff, Brackett wanted to cast his son-in-law, James Lamore, another drunk, in the movie, but Wilder wanted nothing to do with Lamore. He was a mean drunk, and Wilder hated him. But, according to Maurice Zoltov in his book, Billy Wilder in Hollywood, Lamore was not only Brackett's son-in-law, he was also his lover. Take that, please, take that with a grain of salt. Like we said here before, Zoltov's book contains as much gossip passing as fact as it does actual facts. So who knows? Although after Brackett's wife died, he did marry his sister, so there's all kinds of stuff going on in Brackett's love life.
Yeah, saucy. And that seems to have happened a lot more back in the old days, replacing a deceased spouse with a sibling. I've read, a lot of history, and it seems like it was kind of a thing.
Peter Bogdanovich did it, so I guess I have to say it's all okay.
Oh, man. And I do want to say here that by all accounts, Brackett was a very moderate drinker himself. His diaries recorded an occasional night of excess, which was certainly not uncommon in 1940s Hollywood, but most nights it sounds like he stopped after a drink or two. He was a pretty sober guy in all senses. And also, regarding his possible homosexuality, Anthony Slide, who read all of Brackett's diaries in preparing his book, It's the Pictures That Got Small, Charles Brackett on Billy Wilder, doesn't think that Brackett was gay and believes that all the rumors can, in fact, be traced to one biographer. So, regardless of all that, Wilder and Brackett had another tough project on their hands. The Lost Weekend, like Double Indemnity, is a grim story, but even Double Indemnity offers a few laughs. There was no telling how audiences would receive something so unrelentingly bleak. After all, up until this movie, drunks in movies were more or less depicted as goofy buffoons, not desperate addicts. To make things more difficult, Wilder claimed in an interview with the New York Times in July 1944 that the movie would be, quote, 70% silent. This was gearing up to be a real crowd pleaser.
But still, Wilder was forging ahead. He was full steam ahead, and he knew what he needed to make this project work. A great script, as always, and he and Brackett were already nearly there. But more importantly, they needed star power.
Sounds a little tight. Most people drink a little. A lot of them get tight once in a while.
Sure, the lucky ones who can take it or leave it. But then there are the ones who can't take it and can't leave it either. What I'm trying to say is I'm not a drinker. I'm a drunk. They had to put me away once.
You went to a cure.
Which didn't take. You see, that first time we met, I should have had the decency to get drunk just for your sake.
The first thing Wilder needed was a strong lead to play Helen, Don's girlfriend. Helen is barely in the novel because, again, Don's interests are elsewhere. But to make The Lost Weekend pass the Hays Code and, let's be honest, be more digestible for audiences in 1944, Don had to be depicted as being straight. Casting the role of Helen, though, proved to be a challenge. Katharine Hepburn was Wilder's first choice, maybe because she had her own tumultuous relationship with known alcoholic Spencer Tracy. In fact, that duo, the Hepburn-Tracy duo, were scheduled to shoot the movie Without Love for MGM, and it ended up that the schedules overlapped with The Lost Weekend, so she was out. Olivia de Havilland, I always stumble over that, Keir. De Havilland?
De Havilland?
Yeah, she's a big star. Yeah. It's one of those things you always see on posters, but she doesn't come up in conversation often. So
not in the circles you're running in.
So Olivia de Havilland was considered, as was Jean Arthur, but neither ended up taking the role. Some speculate Barbara Stanwyck was offered the role, but I don't know. That seems kind of dubious. The role seems far too small for the woman who was not only the highest paid actress in the country, but the highest paid woman in the country, period. So a supporting role just seems, I don't know. I don't know how you even really offer her that. So,
agreed.
Yeah, that's a weird one. But enter Jane Wyman, who is, look, no Hepburn or Stanwyck, but dependable in her own right.
Casting Ray Milland was more straightforward. If you recall, when Wilder was looking to cast the leads for his movie, The Major and the Minor, he yelled an offer to Milland when they were both caught at a stoplight, and Milland, not taking Wilder seriously, accepted. That's not what happened this time. Wilder was no longer shouting offers in traffic. He could pick who he wanted, for the most part. And for the role of Don Burnham, Wilder wanted stage actor Jose Ferrer, to which Paramount said, no. Wilder wanted The Lost Weekend to be raw and powerful, and he didn't want some slick leading man distracting from the hellish journey Don embarks on. And according to Sykov, that's exactly why Paramount insisted on bringing in a leading man. Bobby De Silva, who was then head of Paramount, said, no, you take a leading man because then the audience will feel for him. They will wish he would reform. And he's kind of right.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think that his instincts are pretty sharp there. Joseph McBride, a film historian who wrote extensively about Wilder, recorded a commentary track for the Kino Lorber release of The Lost Weekend. In it, he details how stars can often, soften the blow of acerbic social commentary, which is why Wilder relied on them so often. His movies were acerbic, to say the least, sometimes even cynical. In Wilder's own words, he said he landed on Milland specifically because, quote, we needed somebody weak but sympathetic, so the audience would be with him even as he slipped into degradation. I knew Ray Milland could carry it off. I figured we were giving him a good chance at getting an Oscar, end quote. And Milland really threw himself into the role. He met with the book's author, Charles Jackson, who shared his own experiences with alcoholism with Milland, and Milland even spent a night in the Bellevue drunk tank. He only lasted a few hours, but it only speaks to how nightmarish those places used to be.
He was no Christian Bale. Bale would have checked himself in for a month.
He would have lost 70 pounds, checked himself in, all in Bale.
He would have become an alcoholic for real.
Come on, Matt, join me one little jigger of greens, huh?
No, thanks.
You don't approve of drinking?
Not the way you drink.
It shrinks my liver, doesn't it, Matt? It pickles my kidneys, yes. But what does it do to my mind? It tosses the sandbags overboard so the balloon can soar. Suddenly I'm above the ordinary. I'm competent, supremely competent. I'm walking a tightrope over Niagara Falls. I'm one of the great ones. I'm Michelangelo molding the beard of Moses. I'm Van Gogh painting pure sunlight. I'm Horowitz playing the Emperor Concerto. I'm John Barrymore before the movies got him by the throat. I'm Jesse James and his two brothers, all three of them. I'm W. Shakespeare. And out there, it's not Third Avenue any longer, it's the Nile now.
Filming began in October 1944, right on the heels of a Paramount executive sending a memo to Wilder and Brackett saying, quote, "Will you please see that we stay out of trouble?" But Wilder loved trouble. In fact, he seemed to feed on it. He was a man who wanted to do things his way, and the word compromise wasn't in his vocabulary.
And Wilder wanted a lot of things his way on The Lost Weekend. Most notably, he wanted to shoot on location in New York, a choice that made executives nervous. They'd built an entire New York City street on this Paramount backlot after all, so, what the hell? Why not just use that? Well, Wilder wanted grit. He wanted authenticity, and shooting on some fake Hollywood backlot just wasn't good enough. But shooting on location meant dealing with onlookers, dealing with weather, dealing with any unknown number of factors that, unlike working on a backlot in sunny California, were out of everyone's control. But there was another thing making execs nervous. At the start of filming, Wilder and Brackett hadn't yet completed the script.
And that's uncommon for them. As with his mentor Ernst Lubitsch, Wilder demanded that every single word in his scripts be perfect and that his actors delivered those words exactly as they were written. Sure, sometimes he and Brackett would rewrite their scripts during filming, but they would never come into production without at least a reliable draft, or most of a reliable draft.
And shooting on the streets of New York, as predicted, was difficult. They tried filming Milan stumbling down crowded streets, using different ways to disguise the camera so they could capture him, surreptitiously. But hardly any of their footage was usable. People would get in the way, they'd lose the light, or they'd film someone picking their nose, which, believe it or not, was forbidden by the Hays Codes. You could not pick your nose on screen. That's
the one thing I agree with Joseph Breen on.
Yeah, no nose picking.
Yeah, I want to see it.
I can see that. I can't think of any.
It corrupts the youth.
I can't think of any nose picking in cinema. Viewers, if you've got a catalog somewhere of cinematic nose picking, send it along. We'd love to.
Does the kid in Bad Santa pick his nose and eat it, or am I?
Oh,
maybe he just has a badly runny nose. I think there's some nose picking in that one.
Yeah, there might be.
Joe Breen would not have allowed it.
He would not have allowed it. No, sir. Anyway, getting back to filming in New York City, it's not going well. At one point, while filming the scene of Milan escaping from the Bellevue Hospital, Milan was nearly arrested for disorderly conduct. Wilder intervened, but at least they could feel confident that Milan's performance was believable, so that they had that going for them.
Their time spent filming in New York took much longer than scheduled, and for the first time in his directing career, Wilder was running the risk of a troubled production. When they returned to California to shoot indoors in mid-October, the script still wasn't finished. Worse, The Lost Weekend was starting to attract national attention. Turns out, a movie showing alcoholism in such a stark and severe way wasn't a hit with the powerful liquor industry, and the executives were concerned over just how their product would be depicted. And the Hays office, which still didn't have its hand on a script that it could reject or accept, was growing very concerned. And if all of that wasn't enough, Wilder was about to make things really interesting.
Keir, my favorite place to record the Filmographers podcast is in your studio in the Fine Arts Building, which is a place that you know a lot about.
I guess you could say I wrote the book on the subject. It's called Chicago's Fine Arts Building, Music, Magic, and Murder.
Whoa, murder?
Hey, artists have a lot of sharp objects lying around. And yes, while I do explore some of the darker things that have happened in this historic building, I focus more on its fascinating history and famous tenants, past and present.
I think my favorite story was about the Fine Arts Building's connection to Citizen Kane. I also love, and no offense, Keir, all the pretty pictures.
None taken, Mike. It's a beautiful hardcover book loaded with stunning photographs and archival images that looks great on your coffee table, or the coffee table of any arts lover in your family.
Listeners, you can order signed, personalized copies of Chicago's fine arts building, Music, Magic, and Murder from our favorite bookstore, Exile and Bookville, located in the Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue. Or find them online at exileandbookville.com. Just use the notes field to tell them how Keir should inscribe it.
It's also available from the publisher at trope.com and wherever books are sold.
Billy Wilder, at the time of filming The Lost Weekend, was a married man. He was married to Judith Kopkis. The two had wed in 1936 and had 2 children, twins, though one of them had died in childbirth. Wilder, as we know, was a bit of a womanizer, dating back to his days as a gigolo in Berlin and even his penchant for picking up prostitutes in his youth. So, yeah. It shouldn't be a surprise that a man with his predilections and status was an unfaithful husband. Now, we don't know if Judith knew about Wilder's philandering or just accepted it, or if she was ignorant of his ways and just, we don't know. But we do know that Wilder's ways were consistent. In fact, Wilder had a regular mistress at the time of filming The Lost Weekend, none other than Doris Dowling, who plays Gloria, the prostitute, in the film. But even that wasn't enough, apparently, to satiate his sexual appetite.
It was not. But Wilder's life changed the moment he met Audrey Young, a young actress who had a minor role as a coat check girl in The Lost Weekend. Young and Wilder began an affair during production, so for those keeping track at home, Wilder was cheating on his wife with his mistress, and now cheating on both his wife and his mistress with Young. He's a busy man. He's writing, he's directing, he's battling the liquor industry and Joseph Breen, and carrying on 2 affairs, and both women, Dowling and Young, had roles in The Lost Weekend. I'm tired just saying that.
Whew, man. A different time, I guess. I don't know how old was he around this point, Keir? He's like in his 30s, I would assume.
Oh my gosh, we should know this.
We should know this. I believe he's in his 30s or maybe early 40s at best. He's not 22, you know, like he's a maturing man, to say the least, but
he's a maturing man who acts a little bit like a teenager at times. I mean, Brackett's diaries are full of references to Billy taking time out during their workday to field phone calls or read letters from, disgruntled lovers. So he was he was a hound dog, is what we're saying.
Yes, he was. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, Keir, that's one of the things that also drove Raymond Chandler, who seemed a little uptight, drove Chandler nuts, is that he would take, time off from their writing. Like he would break in the middle of them brainstorming and writing in their office and have conversations with women. They would call him on the phone and he would drop everything for that. So
Brackett knew the score and chafed at it, but often, you can see him in his diaries kind of thinking through this kind of like, well, there are all these things about Wilder that annoy me, but what am I going to do? And so he just kind of swallows it, whereas it was all new to Chandler. And as you say, Chandler was even more uptight than Brackett. And so he couldn't stand it.
No, he couldn't. So anyway, filmmaker Walter Reich, a friend of Wilder's, described Audrey Young as brilliant, beautiful, and as hard as Billy is. By all accounts, Wilder had met his match. Young was a no-nonsense knockout who could sing, who can act, and she was sophisticated and smart, and to her credit, she didn't take any of Wilder's shit. The two would soon be married, just as soon as Wilder got a divorce and broke things off with his other mistress. So how did Wilder manage to spin all these plates? In the words of Liberace, very well indeed.
And that is a deep cut reference to our episode on the Liberace biopic Behind the Candelabra from our first season. Check it out, folks.
Thanks for catching that, Keir. Now, despite the setbacks, despite the challenges and bad luck and the drama, Wilder cruised through the back half of shooting. While the stressful conditions under which he worked, most of them were stressful conditions of his own making, would break other directors, Wilder thrived. He needed the frenzy. He was never a man who sat still. He was always pacing, always moving, always talking, always doing something, thinking, working. He never stopped, no matter what obstacles were hurled in his path.
The Lost Weekend miraculously finished filming in December, although Wilder and Brackett would tinker with the ending later on, which we'll discuss in a moment. Somehow it was on time and on budget, coming in at $1.25 million. Wilder took home his biggest payday yet, earning, for the very first time, more than his stars. Things looked very promising indeed until the movie had its first test screening.
I just saw his last picture last night, and I talked to Matthau, and he said, we had 2 weeks rehearsal. That's very, very helpful. But it is a luxury that you cannot always afford. But I will insist on it. It's terribly important that because while you're rehearsing, that doesn't cost any money. Once you start shooting, it's $25,000, $35,000, $50,000 a day. The time is before and not after you start after the war started, after you're over the top, you've got to go.
I wonder if Wilder did any rehearsals for The Lost Weekend. I'm guessing that's hard to do when you don't have a script finished. And I know Joan Fontaine complained about not getting any rehearsal time in his next picture.
Well, there is a story of Wilder reading bits of the script to Katharine Hepburn over the phone and trying to convince her to star in the movie that way. But I don't think you'd call that a rehearsal.
Well, do as I say, not as I do. He's the king, after all.
A king who, in early 1945, was about to be shoved off his throne, at least momentarily. Wilder was, at this time, in a pretty dark place. Double Indemnity had been shut out of the Oscars, and Wilder, in part, blamed Paramount and felt betrayed. They had put all their weight behind Going My Way, a musical directed by Leo McCarey and starring Bing Crosby, who would cross paths with Wilder soon enough. Going My Way ended up being the highest grossing movie of the year and won 7 of the 10 Oscars it was nominated for, including a Best Director statue for McCarey and Best Picture. Pop quiz, Keir. What's a one-sentence summary for Going My Way?
It's a movie about a hitchhiker who meets a lady driving in the direction he wants to go.
Yeah, no one knows, which is why just goes to show that no one gives a shit about the Oscars, except for the people who are nominated. And after losing to an inferior pitcher, Wilder was justifiably upset. So upset, according to legend, that when Leo McCarey won Best Director over him, Wilder stuck out his foot and tripped him as he was heading toward the stage to receive his award. There's no footage of this, but kind of seems possible. It realistically does. Another story says that after the ceremony, Wilder was leaving his limo and shouted, quote, "What the hell does the Academy Awards mean anyway, for God's sake? After all, Luis Rainier won 2 times. Luis Rainier!" End quote. Why Wilder had beef with Rainier, we do not know. But we do know that Wilder was just kind of pissed.
It must have been an East Coast, West Coast thing.
Yeah.
European American, I don't know. And The Lost Weekend bombed at its preview because somehow the audience found this dark, depressing movie to be funny. It's hard to imagine how that's even possible, but both Sykov and Chandler report it in their books. And it's on Wikipedia, so it must be true. Although I do have to add a little asterisk and say that once again, Brackett's diaries, which are not the be-all, end-all, he does report people not getting the previews. He doesn't mention the misdirected laughter, but let's just go with not understanding it.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but again, there's it's at some point Brackett starts writing his diaries, I think for posterity. And so it's a little hard to know, is he writing for some future reader? At times he seems quite honest. He's always brutally honest about Billy Wilder. But then again, there are these huge omissions where he doesn't write about his wife's alcoholism. When he talks about institutionalizing her, he just says Elizabeth went back east. So he's vague on that count. So he's a complicated guy. Very, very fascinating person the more I learn about him. But
you've enjoyed those diaries a lot, right?
The diaries are fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It's a look at Hollywood from somebody who's a participant who knew everybody, who is not only a working and respected screenwriter and film producer, but he was a guy who was on, he helped organize the Oscars, and he was like, he played a professional role in all these professional associations in Hollywood. So it is absolutely worthwhile. I'm devouring them. I want to read more. But so again, Brackett's not the ultimate authority, but he does sort of contradict Sykov and Chandler. But Sykov and Chandler are good. They're good journalists too. So they have a source that says people laughed incongruously at the preview for Lost Weekend. And one of the reasons for that could be an extenuating circumstance that I can't believe they proceeded with the preview under this circumstance, but the version they showed to the audiences had a temp score of upbeat jazz that was just wrong for the movie. And bear in mind, before the Lost Weekend, movies consistently portrayed alcoholics as goofy boobs and ne'er-do-wells who were used for comic relief. So part of the reaction could have been to the music, and part of it could have been conditioning. It's almost impossible to imagine anyone laughing at Milan's plight, even if the score was yakety sax, but that's apparently what really happened, at least at first.
And Wilder recalls a preview card that said it was, quote, a great movie. Just take out all the stuff about drinking and alcoholism, end quote. That's probably total bullshit. This is Wilder, but still fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I've gotten some weird Amazon reviews in my time.
Look, Kane damage, 0 stars.
Yeah, totally. It could have happened. Paramount was ready to write it off as a dud before it was even released, and they may have even been happy to do so. According to Sykov, the studio had been offered $5 million by gangster Frank Costello on behalf of the liquor industry to bury the movie. In fact, Costello wanted the negative so he could destroy it. Wilder has said that if Costello had personally offered him $5 million for the movie, he would have taken the cash and burned the negative himself.
I would have too. Even $5 million in today's dollars, I would do that. People are like, burn the thing you just made. I'd be like, give me the check. Now, whether any of that's true or not, which I don't know, it seems possible. Nonetheless, Paramount had enough. They decided to shelve the film, more or less killing it. Wilder went to Germany to help rebuild their film industry and make a documentary about the concentration camps, something we'll explore in more detail in our November Patreon exclusive episode. And The Lost Weekend seemed destined to become the Lost movie. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for Season 2 of the Filmographers podcast, our deep dive into legendary writer-director Billy Wilder.
We're grateful so many of you have chosen to support us on Patreon, and we're showing our appreciation by releasing ad-free versions of our main episodes, plus monthly episodes that are only available to our paid supporters. This month, we'll be talking about Wilder's time working for the U.S. Army in post-World War II Germany, where he reviewed horrific footage of Nazi death camps.
The film that came out of it is called Death Mills. It's heavy stuff, but it's both an important part of Wilder's story and an important bridge between his 1945 picture, The Lost Weekend, and the one released in 1948, The Emperor Waltz.
These Patreon exclusives are available to paid Patreon supporters at any level. If you've been thinking about upgrading your membership, now's the time. Just visit patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast to show your support.
Once again, that's patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. If you join the $2 level, we'll send you a sticker. If you join for $5, we'll send you a coffee mug. Not ready to pay quite yet? Join for free, just so you see what we have to offer.
That's patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. Join today for the full Season 2 experience. Thank you so much for your support. We do it for you, and we couldn't do it without you.
Now, despite threats from the liquor industry and Paramount's threats to shelve the movie indefinitely, maybe even kill it, we all know The Lost Weekend was neither lost nor dead. For starters, Miklos Rosa finally finished the film's actual score, replacing the laugh-inducing temp jazz score. Fresh off of Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound, for which he'd won an Oscar, he also scored Five Graves to Cairo and Double Indemnity. Rosa composed a dreamy, dark score that greatly enhanced the true character of The Lost Weekend. With the new score in place, the response to the movie immediately changed. People got it now. It wasn't a comedic descent into existential hell, but a dramatic one. Crazy. And enthusiasm for the movie's prospects were starting to grow.
With the wind in their sails, Brackett and Wilder decided, in true Wilder fashion, to push things a little more. One aspect of the movie that everyone agreed didn't work was its ending. Now, unfortunately, we've been unable to discover what this original ending was, but we know it wasn't well liked, even with the new score. So, Wilder decided to rewrite and reshoot it. That, of course, cost money, and between the extra work Rosa committed to the score and now a reshoot, the movie did technically go over budget. But Paramount's enthusiasm for its prospects had them opening the checkbook. To help crack the ending, Brackett and Wilder engaged Jackson, who, according to McBride, didn't just like the final scene, but he was ambivalent about the entire movie. Granted, Jackson's ending in the novel is a bleak one. Don remains an alcoholic far from the road to recovery. But that's something that, with the Hays Code, you just couldn't do in film at the time. So they crafted a middle ground. In the movie, and sorry if we're spoiling this 80-year-old film, but it's what we do, Don is ostensibly cured. But it would be a stretch to call it a happy ending, especially when you consider that, at the start of the movie, Don had been sober for all of 10 days. But it was enough to finish Don's character arc, make Jackson happy enough, and keep the Hays Code's dogs at bay. And apparently, it was better than whatever the previous ending was.
As Francois Truffaut said, we all want a happy ending, but life doesn't work that way. Unless you're living under the Hays Code, then you have to have a happy ending.
Left to his own devices and without any authority breathing down his neck, Wilder would have surely ended the movie on a more solemn note. It's probably why, in his interviews with Cameron Crowe, Wilder talks about how much he loves Mike Figgis's Leaving Las Vegas, a movie that was clearly inspired by The Lost Weekend.
Now, you might be wondering, what about all those other obstacles The Lost Weekend was facing, like the liquor industry and censorship over content? Well, funny things happen when you have a potential hit movie on your hands, particularly one with Oscar prospects, which is what Paramount was starting to believe. Now, you can speculate whether Paramount threw some weight around or not, but the movie passed the Production Code Administration with very little feedback, and it also passed through local censorship boards. It was cleared for a theatrical release domestically and abroad. It actually opened in England before it opened in the United States. Interesting little tidbit there. Keir, now that the movie finally got its release, how did The Lost Weekend perform?
Yeah, that's an easy answer. The movie's an award-winning classic and everyone knows it, but I was surprised, to be honest, by just how well it performed. As we already noted, the movie was made for $1.25 million, potentially a little more when accounting for the reshoots, but it grossed over $11 million, over 9 times its budget. That is a remarkable success.
Yeah, and that was just the beginning. The Lost Weekend also won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, though at the time it was then called, excuse my French, not in terms of swearing, but in terms of pronunciation, Grand Prix du Festival International du Film, something like that. I like Palme d'Or better because I can say it. It also won the top prize at the New York Film Festival, but another movie was also picking up steam during award season. The Bells of St. Mary's, directed by Wilder's old pal, Leo McCarey. Boy, did they crank out movies at this era. Jesus Christ.
Oh my God. Like not Leo McCarey again.
Yeah, well, this set the stage, Keir. Set the stage for an Academy Awards rematch. Wilder versus McCarey. This time, it's personal. Although, I don't know, feels pretty personal last time, too, when Wilder tripped McCarey when he's going to get his award and then threw a temper tantrum in the parking lots.
Let's get ready to rumble!
This time there'd be no need for a fight, no tantrums, not even any dramatic feuding because The Lost Weekend cleaned up at the Oscars. After having won Best Actor at Cannes and the Golden Globes, Ray Milland picked up his first and only Academy Award, besting the likes of Bing Crosby, thank God, Gregory Peck, and Gene Kelly. Man, God, did people love musicals in the 40s? My God.
Well, maybe not all musicals, and that's a teensy spoiler for our next episode. Getting back to the Oscars, Wilder and Brackett won for Best Adapted Screenplay, Wilder won for Best Director, and The Lost Weekend took home the Best Picture honors, although technically Brackett took home the honors because he was the producer on the film, and producers get to take home the actual statue. It's unconfirmed whether Wilder tripped him at a later date.
That win also made The Lost Weekend the first film to win both Cannes and the Oscar for Best Picture. Only 3 more movies to date have achieved that honor. Marty in 1955, then you have to go all the way to 2019, I believe, for Parasite, and then Anora. A box office smash and an awards darling, and to think The Lost Weekend was a movie that almost got shelved. Hell, it nearly got destroyed.
I wonder if 1940s audiences would relentlessly have sent in letters to Paramount demanding they release the Wilder cut.
Oh, dear God, Keir. What have you done? What if this is the dark side of the Filmographers podcast?
We want the Wilder cut of Double Indemnity and Lost Weekend. Come on.
Oh, I mean, yet there's 2 separate endings out there. Now we know the ending for Double Indemnity, but we don't know. We don't even know. Yeah, Keir.
Yeah.
Get your stationery ready. We've got a job to do.
I've got my fountain pen loaded and ready to ink.
Oh, that'll really make some head spins over at Paramount when they're getting shit. Paramount doesn't even exist anymore. It's Skydance now, basically. We're writing to an empty post office. Oh, sad. All right. Well, Keir, I know it seems, I don't know, it's kind of trite to ask because the movie is a celebrated award-winning financial success and has stood the test of time, but nonetheless, Keir, what did you think of The Lost Weekend?
Yeah, no, I hated it. Just kidding. Yeah, that's kind of what can you say? I mean, I think I'll keep my comments brief because, as you say, it's all those things. It's a Best Picture winner. It's a deserved classic. Although, gosh, I have a Kino Lorber disc, but has Criterion done an edition? I mean, it's certainly a movie deserving the Criterion treatment. I'm not aware that they've ever done that.
No Criterion of The Lost Weekend, unfortunately. I think it's limited to Kino Lorber.
Ooh, well, thanks to Kino Lorber for that. But I would love a loaded with extras 4K restoration. So, if anyone's listening, make that happen. Look, it's still a harrowing watch. It's amazing. It's such a fascinating movie because, it's dated in some ways, but it still has the emotional wallop, for sure. I saw it many years ago. I watched it again, of course, for this episode. And both times you just find yourself lost in this man's descent into hell. And Ray Milland, I think, is great. It's kind of wild because Wilder threw shade at him later. And I couldn't find the exact quote this morning, but he said Milland was not a great actor, but it was a great performance. What do you think about that, Mike?
Unfair. Milland is great. It's funny. I just watched a Milland movie that was written by our good pal Charles Brackett, The Uninvited. A horror movie, a pretty soft horror movie.
Yeah.
And I'm watching it and I'm like, man, between that, which he plays a pretty straight man in this haunted house scenario, between that and you look at the major and the minor, and I think we both agree he was terrific as he straddled the line perfectly in a movie that needed someone to straddle the line perfectly, given its premise. This just lovable boob who's just kind of clueless, and he just is harmless enough that he could fall in love with Ginger Rogers and it was okay. And then he does this, the range is spectacular. I mean, I've seen Milland and other things too, but just those 3 examples in this compressed space, I watched these in the last month, and I'm like, Milland is fantastic. I don't know. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Milland fan for sure. I guess if I'm gonna give credence to Wilder at all, like I would say, well, okay, maybe he's not in the one of the all-time greats. It's like people say about baseball, there's the Hall of Fame and then there's the Hall of Really Good. Like maybe he's in the Hall of Really Good, but he's definitely he's up there. He's up there for me. I think he's versatile. He's always really watchable, and as you say, range is not to be discounted as a talent. Now, I did say that some aspects of the movie feel a little dated. There are things about that, and some of those are because of the PCA and Joe Breen and things that they had to do. But I will say that the lack of a traditional 3-act structure feels daringly modern and also works really well with the subject material. It just plunges us so disorientingly into his world, and it makes the movie feel a lot more contemporary as a result. It's not a simple morality tale about a drunk that probably could have been made instead as the first movie to really treat alcoholism as a serious subject. As good as Meland is, I will say that Wyman, the Helen character is just underwritten. So I think it's a weak character. I don't know that it's Wyman's fault. I think she's solid with what she's got to work with, but it's frankly a little too much to believe that she is so relentlessly, the faithful helpmeet and, the one who's just like believes in him no matter what. Cause he's really given us very little, she just takes his abuse and keeps saying, no, but you've got this gift, and modern audiences aren't going to buy it. Gloria, I would say, like, apparently because of Doris Dowling's relationship with Wilder, Brackett was really anti her and thought she was terrible. He came around her performance. I actually think she's pretty lively. No matter what Brackett thinks, I think she's got an interesting screen presence, and I like it when she's on screen.
I do too. I wonder if there's bad blood. Look, if there's anything to be believed of the Charles Brackett homosexuality claims, I wonder if you could, through a certain lens, look at this and say Brackett's just pissed because Charles Lamore couldn't get on set, and like the set is filled with Wilder's mistresses. Like you can't throw a rock and not hit one.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Like if he's, and because of the whatever the homophobia at the time, he's just if he were gay, and if that were his motive, he's got two hands tied behind his back and there's nothing he can do.
Yeah, but although, like we said, Zolotov's book is borderline gossip rag, so like it's hard to really invest into what he says.
And just the last thing I would just say is that I think the movie is absolutely terrific up to the very end, and I think the ending is utterly unconvincing. But again, that's forced on the filmmakers because of the code, and they had to give some hope for redemption to this character. But having watched the whole drama and having watched his helplessness in the grip of his disease, we do not in any way believe that our protagonist is going to actually stay sober and write that novel. It's this kind of like, it's like the equivalent of a deathbed confession or an 11th hour, turn, or a Deus Ex Machina, or I'm going to run out of examples here, but it feels very tacked on. However, it doesn't ruin the movie because we, the audience, really know. Like, we know the true ending is tragedy. There's that little funny taste in your mouth from what the movie is trying to present to you as his salvation. But we know the real ending of that movie, the Wilder cut, would have been as grim as the subject matter deserves.
Well, I have a question for you, Keir. This is something that I watched a few times over the last week. And I have a question about the ending specifically. So if you recall, the first night of the weekend, Don returns home. He's got the 2 bottles of rye with him, and he sits in his like easy chair, and he's got a glass of rye next to him. And the camera is like just a little bit above and like kind of plunges into the actual glass and then cuts to whatever's next. So my question, I'm wondering, I don't know, who knows about intent or whatever, but is the whole weekend potentially a dream? And Don is like, Don dies. Like, Don is dead. Everything from that point on is a dream, more or less. And the rest is him like literally plunging into the bottle with the camera, drowning, dying, and the rest is more or less a dream with a tacked on, hopeful coda.
Oh my God, Mike. Wow. It had never occurred to me. This is one. I feel like there are a few movies like this where people can examine these alternate takes or reads on it. No, I didn't think about that. I'll have to mull that one over a little bit. It is interesting because, Wilder having, done such an amazing job with the flashback in Double Indemnity has fallen in love with the flashback device and is using it again in Lost Weekend, and we'll use it again in the next movie, and then we'll use it again in Sunset Boulevard. And so not only are other people imitating Wilder with flashbacks, he's imitating Wilder. It's not quite Inception level where we're getting lost and which level of reality are we in? But you might have just Inceptioned me on the Lost Weekend.
Well, I didn't mean to go full Nolan, but it's just a thought that I had. Maybe it's just a product of me having watched it too much. So your mind starts to crack open a little bit. But I'm with you. I mean, there's really not much I can add. I mean, what I'll say. There's two things I'll say. One, I'll add that again, like we were talking about with particularly Five Graves to Cairo and Double Indemnity as well, is again, the camera work is just terrific. There's so many. And again, this is what he learned from, Ernst Lubitsch is telling the story visually. And there's so many visual flourishes. There's so many times where you see Don behind grates or behind lattice or behind bars or something like that, where he's in prison. You're looking at him through things and make him look like he is in prison. There's actually one shot, my favorite shot of the film, where he goes early on after he kind of steals the $10 that was meant for the maid. He goes down to the liquor store and you see his exchange from behind a case, not a case, but a shelving of bottles of liquor, and you're seeing everything through the bottles of liquor. So you're seeing Don in this way that he exists as, kind of filtered through booze. It's filtering through, but also they look like they're lined up like bars, like he's imprisoned, and it's just so clever. The moment where he is searching for the bottle of liquor and he gives up and it's up in the light, you see the shadow cast against the ceiling. There's just so many great storytelling flourishes that I just marvel at how little, given Wilder's ego, I guess you can say, that he gives himself such little credit of being so good behind the camera, so good, subtle, but with intent and purpose and clarity. And it's just remarkable. I just love it.
I'm so glad you brought that up, and particularly that shot of from through the bottles at the back of the bar, because that is so iconic. It's so symbolic. It's the bottles, the next to the bottles themselves are the bars to his jail cell. And the movie also, the location shooting paid off. And I think that adds this level of grit. Now, some of the stuff they shot on location couldn't be used because you can obviously see some things that are on a sidewalk are a set, but they definitely got a lot of mileage out of the location shoot. And that just adds this little level of documentary authenticity that helps it elevate it had they, over what it would have been had they shot the entire thing on the lot. It's just got that little bit of grit, whether it's the scenes of him on the sidewalk or, him shot through a shop window with the street behind him and actual passersby going about their day, or him climbing up the stairs to go to the L. You feel him in that bleak place. You feel his fatigue and his exhaustion swallowed by this great big city, the uncaring city. It looks right for what it is. Now, granted, it's also a movie of its time. So there are a few, shots, where they're using a rear projection. He's meant to be outside at night where it just looks a little cheesy and you're not buying it. But hey, you get a movie from 1945. Some of that's going to go with the territory.
Yeah. And I will add, it was the scene of Milan stumbling through New York on the Sunday, this montage of him going from like pawn store to pawn store, and he's stumbling and he's just nearly delirious. That's kind of a first of its kind, that kind of montage of somebody walking and the way they cut it. I'm reading this book. It's very interesting from Walter Murch, who's, iconic film editor. He's been around forever. He's written a few books on editing, and one is called In the Blink of an Eye. Well worth picking up, well worth checking out for anybody who's into movies and making of, because he speaks, not only is he a seasoned pro and one of the best there ever is, best there's been, he's still alive, but he speaks so eloquently about film, and he's so educated, and he's just so explains things really richly. But he talks about like the nation's period of film, when film became film, was the idea of montage, of editing, like cutting things together. The early film was like one reel, one location, one time. But when they started to be able to jump, and there was questions on whether audience would understand, like we're in one place at one time, and then now we're in one place, another place at another time, and so on and so forth, and different characters and the way we understand film, just the language of film. That's something that had developed over time. And that was like, to him, that's how film really came to be film, was with the advent of montage. This was one of the first montages of its kind in The Lost Weekend, is like taking him from place to place, and the way they had the camera on him and like walking through the streets. So it's a really unique and effective scene that Wilder executed, that again deserves credit for, because it's one, it's kind of groundbreaking, and two, it's really effective. You really get the sense of his disorientation and desperation, and you feel uncomfortable, and Don is getting sick. It's just so good. But yeah, anyway, sorry for the tangent there. But Walter Murch, check him out. He's the best. But one other thing that I'll say, there are these movies, and I think I was telling you this the other day, I was telling somebody, that to me kind of like exist out of time, that you watch it and you're like, I cannot believe that this movie was made in 19 blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of pre-code movies that to me are like absolutely deranged, and I use that word specifically. There are
lovingly, you use that word lovingly.
Oh, I love them. Like, you watch movies like Dr. X, or anything made by Edward G. Ulmer, or Edgar G. Ulmer, I forget Ulmer's movies. Detour.
Edgar.
Yeah, I think it's Edgar. Forgive me for muffing that, but Edgar G. Ulmer, The Black Cat. The Black Cat is like so messed up. Like, and I'm not going to spoil that for anyone, because I urge everyone to go and watch it. It's Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, and it is so crazy and so deranged and so weird. Like, in the content of what it's about, you have to watch this movie. It's like 60 minutes. I urge people to watch it. It's so nuts that this movie got made. This is pre-code. But there's movies that you just kind of can't believe that they exist at that time for various reasons. And Lost Weekend is like that. I'm like, I cannot believe this movie was made when it was made. It's so, granted, okay, the last, 3 minutes, 180 seconds. Okay. Like, you just got to do that to appease the boards. But like, otherwise, this movie is like relentlessly dark, hard to watch. And so good and so ahead of anything else around it, that you kind of just marvel that it exists in the time and space that it does. And I was blown away, Keir. I was blown away by how good this was.
Oh my God. I get it.
All right, this brings us to a recurring segment, the Filmographers 5. While a masterpiece, my goodness, The Lost Weekend is a serious downer. It's grueling to watch Ray Milland descend into his hell, to watch him suffer in alcoholism's grip. Double Indemnity was also dark, but at least it had the sheen of genre to keep it light on its feet, and it had Edward G. Robinson. The Lost Weekend, not so much. That doesn't make it any less rewarding. We both really loved it, but it certainly inhibits its rewatchability. That said, who doesn't love a feel-bad movie? I love feel-bad movies. I truly do. Sometimes, look, man, like, you just got to purge your own demons through somebody else's suffering.
Indeed you do. Call it schadenfreude, call it whatever you'd like, but we at the Filmographers believe that you need balance in all things. Sure, we love our Ted Lassos, at least season 1, but there's all room for Don Burnham as well.
And that's why the category for this episode's Filmographers 5 are our favorite feel bad movies. Keir, start us off.
Our number 5 feel-bad movie is Melancholia. I mean, the name kind of says it all, and if that wasn't enough, it's the second movie in Lars von Trier's Depression trilogy, eradicating all doubt as to what this movie is about. Starring Kirsten Dunst, who's excellent in this, as one of 2 sisters who gets married just before a rogue planet is set to collide with Earth. We joke about it being a downer of a film, and it is, but it's also a sensitive portrait of depression and sadness that's beautifully rendered by von Trier's unique sensibilities as a filmmaker.
Our number 4 feel-bad movie is Grave of the Fireflies, an animated film from Studio Ghibli that will tear your heart from your chest and send children running for the exit. Didn't think you'd see a cartoon on this list, did you? Well, Grave of the Fireflies would tell you to hold its beer if it weren't a movie made for children. The movie follows orphan siblings as they struggle to survive the final gasps of the Pacific War. To talk about it would be to ruin its impact, and its impact is truly profound. It's a grueling watch, though. What these children go through will haunt your dreams, but it's also bold, important movie, and you know what? Sometimes kids ought to see movies that rattle their cozy little cages every now and then.
Our number 3 feel-bad movie is Come and See, because good God, there are movies about the horrors of war, and then there's Come and See. This film is horrifying and brutal, but that's the point. It's trying to depict the nightmarish existence of life under Nazi occupation, and it doesn't flinch for a single second. It's violent, drenched in realism, and also features a young protagonist. The story follows a teenage boy who joins the Soviet resistance thinking he can be a hero, but the war has other things in store for him. Terrible, terrible things.
Our number 2 feel-bad movie is Synecdoche, New York. And look, I love this movie, but it is so relentlessly sad. Written and directed by Charlie Kaufman, Synecdoche, New York tells the story of a theater director played by Philip Seymour Hoffman in one of his greatest roles, who devotes his life trying to create a play that aims to understand life itself. Why are we here? What are we supposed to do with the time we have? It's a deeply profound movie and a deeply sad movie and a difficult movie to watch, unless you're a sicko like me who's watched it multiple times.
And our number 1 feel-bad movie has got to be Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream. This movie punishes you for watching it. Like, how dare you turn this on? Based on Hubert Selby Jr.'s equally harrowing novel, Requiem for a Dream follows a group of drug addicts all trying to achieve their dreams. They do not. While a truly excellent film with knockout performances, particularly from Ellen Burstyn, it is a bleak, bleak portrait of drug abuse with an ending that will make your stomach churn. I'm a little queasy just thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I share your sentiment here. But I'll add just a bit more because we didn't get bleak enough. We didn't get sad enough.
Release the Moreci cut.
Hey, here it comes. Hold on to your seats because I'm going to shout out Salo, a movie that, oh boy, if you don't know the story of the movie, go look it up for yourself if you have the nerve. And also, look, we can't leave a segment about just bleak, sad, disturbing movies without at least mentioning Martyrs. I don't know, maybe it's not a feel-bad movie, but if you've watched this movie more than once, please explain yourself. Keir, if someone's coming to Chicago, what's one place they have to visit?
Mike, no one should leave town without stopping by Exile in Bookville, the city's most beautiful and carefully curated bookstore. It's located on the second floor of the historic Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue.
Hey, didn't you write a book about the Fine Arts Building?
Why, yes, I did. It's called Chicago's Fine Arts Building, Music, Magic, and Murder, and you can find it at Exile.
Exile is the best. Wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling books, all lovingly selected by owners Javier and Kristen Ramirez. I guarantee you'll find something to read.
Their strong suit may be general and literary fiction, but I particularly love the middle room. That's where I find graphic novels as well as books about art and music, cooking and cocktails, and our personal favorite, books about movies.
Javier and Kristen were kind enough to let the Filmographers recommend our favorites, so stop by and see what we selected.
I wrote a shelf talker for one of my all-time favorites, Kyle Buchanan's Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, the wild and true story of Mad Max Fury Road.
They also stocked one of my faves, Sam Wasson's The Big Goodbye, Chinatown, and the Last Years of Hollywood.
Exile also has nonfiction, short stories, small press titles, and the very best in modern horror.
Listeners, if you're coming to Chicago, don't leave without visiting Exile in Bookville in the Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue. But you don't have to come to Chicago. You can find all they have to offer at exileinbookville.com.
Because there's more to life than movies. There are also books.
About movies. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you're taking this journey through the life and career of the great Billy Wilder with us. Want to show us some love? Leave us a rating or review on whatever podcasting platform you listen to us on. Have a comment or suggestion? We'd love to hear it. Email us at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you, as always, to our fantastic producer, Kevin Lau, who makes our podcast sound and look as good as it does. Our theme music was composed and played by Gompson, and our logo and merch is designed by Cosmo Graff.
Join us in 2 weeks for Wilder's next film, a musical starring Bing Crosby that he made for reasons. I guess he had some reasons. I don't know, Keir. Join us anyway.